Hi there, lovely folks. It's a great pleasure to welcome you all here. Fantastic to see so many kind of folk from the family of the school. So welcome to this, which is the third of the Fast Forward lectures for this semester. My name's Andrew Barry. I'm one of the teachers at the School of Architecture. Just to go do housekeeping, outside bathrooms are outside, just across the foyer there, and down a little corridor. In the unlikely event of something going wrong, assemble out on the footpath. In the now slightly more likely event of something going wrong on the footpath out there, we'll head back in here. So my great pleasure to introduce Sarosh. I can give you a little bit of the deep history, the deep Sarosh history in introducing. So I first got to know Sarosh in the mid-2000s, 20 years ago, when he was part of a crew of students at the school that were doing a super interesting project that was called WAYD, W-A-Y-D. What are you doing? Which was a very cool student publication, just sort of showing the work of what folk were doing. And then he, many will remember, he did an amazing thesis project which won the NZIA Student Design Awards for that year, and then disappeared after Sam and Reed, and then reappeared with Sam and Reed with that amazing project over at St Matthew's, before he then decided to go down a kind of hybrid academic track and did a PhD. Was one of the first folk here at the school to do a creative practice PhD. In fact, one of the first people at the university to exploit that possibility. And then, of course, has joined with Aaron at PAC Studio in producing some of the projects that many of you will be aware of, and which we are going to hear some more about tonight. So, welcome, Sarosh Mulla.
Okay, thank you very much for coming out tonight, and thank you, Andrew, for the ancient history there. Feels like a very long time ago. It's been 12 years since I gave a Fast Forward lecture, so I'm very happy to be back. It has been a relatively busy 12 years, so I have some things to show you. But tonight my aim is to do what no architect armed with a podium and a microphone has ever done before, and that is to finish early and get you home. So I'm going to go pretty quick. And the aim was also to make sure that there's time for lots of questions at the end. And some of you who have been my students, and I spot a couple of you, will know that I do one thing in my lectures, where I, at some point, will throw my hand in the air, and I will expect all of you to quickly put your hand in the air, and the last person to put their hand up will be the first person to ask a question at the end. So we will do that today too. And it can occur at any time. So keep focused, people. Okay. So now with the appropriate level of tension, let's begin. So I practice with Aaron Patterson. Many of you will know Aaron personally, professionally. I love Aaron. Aaron has given me so much in my career and is such a wonderful friend. He is also an incredible designer and a hugely generous person. So I want to premise what I'm going to talk about later on the fact that all of it comes out of the collaboration we have together. And together we are both in academia and in practice. And I suppose I often think of it in the same way as Indiana Jones, where you're in your tweeds some days talking about the theory, and then other days you're in the trenches defending your project from the forces of evil. And a lot of that straddling between those two modes helps us to figure out what it is that we're interested in. And it leads to this kind of this big question of what are we doing? Not only in splitting our time, but moreover in what are we doing with the way that we operate in the profession? And I always come back to this answer. Through our work, we are offering an alternative to the dour landscape of sameness. Sameness in outlook, sameness in colour, sameness in approach, sameness in construction and detail. And instead, I always think that we look for difference. And because I'm an academic, I can't help but go to some obscure theory. So I think of this idea of differential space. And Lefebvre talks about this as a counterpoint to the abstract, uniform, commodified space of international capitalist modernism. And instead, we think about differential space as concerned with specificity, the local, and different cultural histories. To this thinking, we add the specificity of the people involved, not only in the design, but also the clients and our builders and other consultants, and the desire to use architecture as part of a decolonial agenda. And also, and critically, to find architecture as a source of joy, and that joy is an established and valid part of architecture. Joy, fun, humour, these are all things that make life worth living and architecture worth practicing. And these are what we pursue in our work. Now, if we take that concept of differential space and we read this wonderful book, we also find this idea of the phenomenological house. Within that, there is this idea of a house constructed that provides spaces in which materials and light and time interact to produce feelings and memories. In that book, there are images of Picasso on holiday. We can see through the collection of objects, surfaces, and experiments in the building that there is a very specific feeling being generated, and a time and a place. It could be no other. And so I suppose what we try to do is seek joy in differential space and phenomenological experience. Or AKA, we seek fun. We want our spaces to be fun. But how do we do this? When we are working across academia and practice and a whole range of other things, sometimes I find that I need to diagram what's happening at the current moment just to figure out where I should be standing at that moment. And this diagram shows some of the different strands in the work that we do, with a few projects and collaborators dotted into the atomic view of the practice. At the center is the kind of nucleus, which you might be able to read, says, "Designing really fucking good houses." Around this, there are rings that take lots of different ideas. You've got fabrication research, you've got drawing research, you've got teaching, a kind of an interest in intentional colour. There's joy and levity and humour, all sorts of things. And along each of these rings, there are projects. Now tonight, instead of taking you through just a whole range of projects, I'm going to take you to the intersection of a couple of these rings. Let's start here with the importance of language and the ideas without ego. So, in 2008, this glorious documentary was released. It focused on the legendary fashion designer Valentino. Now, if you aren't familiar with Valentino, he is one of the most celebrated fashion designers who has ever lived. He's dressed thousands and thousands of celebrities, models, and even royalty. And the film focuses on the preparation and eventual presentation of his last collection, as well as an enormous retrospective celebration of his career, held, of course, under the stars in the Colosseum. Throughout his long career, his partner, Giancarlo, is by his side, supporting and collaborating with him. The film ends with the runway show's huge explosion of fireworks as Valentino strides down the runway, and to rapturous applause from a huge number of very important people. And he exits the Colosseum and steps into a waiting limousine, where Giancarlo is sitting in the back seat. From here, fresh from his greatest triumph ever, he asks his longtime partner, the only person he can really trust, how he thinks it went. And he says to him only 3 words: too much tan. And throughout the show, not a single person has said anything to Valentino about the level of tan. No one has mentioned that he has painted himself like a tangerine. And the only person who is able to do that is someone so close to him who has been collaborating with him and has that stake in the work as well. And I think it's a lesson not only in the power of a few small words, but also in humility and truth. The phrase "too much tan" has become a kind of shorthand in our studio, and it means that you've pushed an idea too far, to a point that it rightly should be pointed out and perhaps ridiculed. But also it is a kind of parable for the ego of the creative person, that you should never get yourself to a point where you can't see the obvious because you have become so self-important. And that's also the relationships that you have with the people that you create with that prevent you from becoming insufferable. So no matter the topic, everyone in our studio has the ability to call bullshit. Whether that be on a design direction, a way of thinking, or even the way that the practice is going as a whole. You always have the ability to challenge the expected norm or the accepted way of thinking. So phrases like "too much tan," very many colloquialisms, and somehow even Cockney rhyming slang have become part of the way that we work together, and even in our most serious projects. So language is as fundamental to us as drawing is. But let's get back to why you came. We're going to see some sweet houses. But this time we're going to look at that through the idea of design clarity and sustainability in the practice. This is Waimataruru, designed together with Christina Pickford. What I love about this project is that it's clear. And by that I mean it navigates a range of issues of site and climate and program through a very clear design strategy. It has a sloping roof that hangs over a stepping floor plate and evenly spaced glulam portal frames that march through the structure, setting up a rhythm for the whole house. The portal strategy sets up how each room functions and even the alignment of entrances and exits, artworks and furniture. Its logic is displayed so that the idea of the project and its structural resolution are clear to read for everyone who visits it. And this type of clarity is what we seek in every project, where the idea is legible, where you don't need to have read any of the obscure French theory to get it. It's quietly and clearly joyous. So, as you can see, the site is terrible, and it is, it's a kind of responsibility designing on a place like this. But also, I think this project is a demonstration of how your responsibility in being sustainable can be achieved while not diluting any of the beauty of the place or the architecture. This project generates all of its own electricity, it deals with all of its own water needs, it's passively heated and cooled, it's constructed to a passive house standard with an airtight envelope and high-performance joinery and all the bells and whistles, but it does all that stuff without shouting about it. And all of our design thinking is directed at the experience inside. And it's an important project for us because it marked the start of our journey in sustainability. So let's talk a little bit more about carbon and intentional colour. So this is Waikareru, a place that I love, and wonderful that Anne is here too. Anne and Jeremy started this wonderful place as an eco-sanctuary where I did my PhD project and where so much great restoration work is happening. And it also plays a vital role in our practice as we have made the move to become a carbon positive practice. Over the last 3 years now, we have been heading that way, and we've achieved that status by documenting and calculating all of our carbon within the practice, and then looking at how we can minimize that and offsetting any residual carbon through credits that are from Waikareru, where the landscape is regenerating with native forest, and there's a whole range of biodiversity and educational programs. It really is the gold standard, and if you would like to do the same, please let me know and I will tell you how. But becoming a carbon positive practice has also been a step in then trying to move our projects towards also being carbon positive. This is a project that's under construction at the moment. It is a very kind of interesting project for us in that it is a kind of standard type for us, a villa renovation, but also it is an opportunity again to think of big ideas. And I suppose this project is so interesting because we have applied that carbon methodology from the beginning, calculating what the operational carbon of the building will be over its 100-year lifespan, but also in the construction. And then through that design process, we've been crushing that figure wherever we possibly can, and then coming to a final residual amount that we are then offsetting again with credits at Waikareru. So this project will be our very first carbon positive house. It's a reshaping of a villa with a rear addition over 2 stories. The rear addition does a couple of interesting things in terms of having double height voids and angular kind of orientations. And that also sets up an interesting relationship between the painting studio that's below and the master suite that is above. The project's currently under construction, and it is a joy to be at. I think one part of this process that we go on that very few people talk about is what an absolute pleasure it is to work with really good builders. And conversely, how painful it can be to work with a bad one. These guys are wonderful, however, and they have been showing so much care in putting together the house. And in doing so, they have become collaborators in this idea of using colour in an intentional way. Here you can see our cadmium yellow steel structure, and you can kind of make out on the screen the beam underneath it is actually a very light lilac. And as we've kind of started to find more colour and texture in the way we work, we've realised that that is a strand of that differential approach that we're looking for. And after years and years of arguing to keep colour in the projects, it's now starting to seek us out with clients who are looking for more adventurous use of the colour. This is a part of the screen on the outside of that same house with its kind of little blue highlights. Inside we have a canopy of yellow being lit from above with reds and greens and yellows in various shades. It's really a kind of a house where every colour has been debated and talked over and tested. Okay, so we're doing okay? We're feeling all right? No one's watching for a hand? No, you're okay. All right. All right, let's keep going. All right. let's move on to sonography and topography. So we live here on this incredible bubbling volcanic isthmus, on topography that's wildly interesting, culturally important, and unlike anything anywhere else. It's fostered an interest in topography and what I call topographic planning in our Auckland projects, particularly in our renovations. At the same time, we have a deep interest in sonography and architectural experience, where the scenes within the architecture can be designed and framed, presented to the occupants as a sequence, as a story or a narrative of a way that you could live in the house. These two ideas quietly collide in projects like this. This is Lava Flow. It's a new project of ours that we've just completed in Mount Albert. And when we came to the site the very first time, we found a single bay villa on what we thought was a completely flat site. As we came around the side of the house, we realised that Auckland's topography was actually rolling quite aggressively as you came to the backyard, and there was a huge precipice of many metres in the backyard. And there was a rather unsympathetic 1980s addition that was hanging many, many metres over that precipice. So our approach was to unapologetically demolish that 80s addition, and then to survey the underlying lava flow and to follow the movements of the topography of the stone underneath, and then to extend the house so that it connected more to that landscape. Along the way, we set up a deeply orthogonal grid of spaces, and then we design for the specifically diagonal scenes that are found across that orthogonal space. This is a kind of neoclassical trick. You set up a very, very orthogonal plan for your building, and then you place a number of objects that mean that occupants have to always walk on the diagonal, seeing your orthogonal building from a kind of a viewpoint that is flattering. There are a number of these viewpoints that we designed to, in the first instance, in a project that have kind of come out like this. And they are not only seen in plan, but also vertically. There's a very deep red reveal to a large skylight over the kitchen, which gives you a kind of Tyrrell-like artwork to look at over the kitchen. And finally, the last scene in the house is this kind of fourth wall on the room, which is the mature native trees that are actually growing at the bottom of the precipice in the backyard. So we take the landscape and try and find the topographic and the scenographic in the project. Okay, now we'll change gears a little bit and talk a little bit about some of our research and exhibition projects with the wonderful Marion Mackin, who I'd like to single out and point to. Now, Marion is a wonderful collaborator, mostly because she's so much smarter than Aaron and I. And so by association, we are elevated. And this is one of the first projects that we did together. This is a drawing project where we went back to past projects and asked our clients to put on motion capture suits and use their houses. And in doing so, we create another type of architectural drawing that goes back into our models and becomes a projection in the studio. Now, I'm not entirely sure how the NZRAB feels about asking your clients to put on skin-tight motion capture suits, but I can confirm that all the clients were willing participants, and it was the kind of start of a whole range of exhibition projects together. From there, we went to the Mayor Gallery at Coca in Christchurch and created a huge robotic drawing machine that drew with light in the gallery. The project took inspiration from pivot irrigators on the Canterbury Plains and walked itself across the gallery for months, back and forth, drawing with light and shadow. It inverted the usual situation of a static piece of architecture and a moving light source being the sun. Instead, here the architecture moves and the light source is static. The shadows become volumetric forms that can be occupied, and the work is accompanied by a parametric soundscape that changes with the position of the machine and the viewer's position in the gallery. Alongside the walking robot, we also have a digital world created in VR, where the language of the built machine is expanded to create a version that is limitless. So I can hear you asking, why do all this stuff? Why bother? And I suppose the answer for me is that when we work on these distilled research and drawing projects, the ideas that are in the practice come out, get clarified, and then they go back into the built work. And that, to me, is a really fruitful loop. Okay. Now, as Andrew mentioned, I started working after university in heritage, and it has been something of a passion ever since. And whenever we do that, we also try and overlap it with this other idea of being confidently contemporary. And every so often, we get to work on a project like this, where the house or the building is a very special thing to start with. And we always try and find that balance between being reverent but also contemporary. This is Wakahuia, and as the name suggests, it's a kind of treasure box of art and artifacts. It's a home filled with life and a life well lived. Our client is a hugely interesting man who is very knowledgeable on how colour can work and how it can improve the way you live. And he's taught us a huge amount about that. Our work with him started with the development of a colour scheme for the dining room and then expanded into the design of a new kitchen and bathroom. And we are continuing on, which I'll show you in a moment. We took inspiration from his other use of colour in the house. These are schemes that he came to on his own. And I think that there's a kind of beauty in these that we were always kind of drawn to. So much of our work comes as this kind of collaborative process of getting to know our clients and getting to understand what they can add to our process. This is where we're heading now on that project. Now, having dealt with the ground floor, we've been asked to go up. And so we are designing a library and a belvedere to look at the harbour. This is a photograph from this morning on the scaffold as it is constructed. And inside the belvedere, with our wonderful construction team, this is the space that we are creating together. It is a room dedicated to joy. It has no other function than to make you happy when you walk into it. And this has been a kind of a learning from this project, but also the collaboration with this client, of finding a way of living and practicing in a way that makes you happy, without wondering what the accepted norm is, or without wondering what people will think. And I won't use this specific phrase that is usually bandied about around that. I think the idea really is the kind of freedom to think about what it is that you like to do and to pursue that through the architecture. Okay, something a little bit different now. Affordability and density. Now, many people may not know that we actually also work in multi-unit housing. And this is a project that we're working on currently in Canterbury. This is Arbor Green. It is affordable housing, but not boring housing. And I think that is the kind of critical distinction to make. We are designing these places with the same process, the same rigor, the same commitment to joy and fun as we are on any of our other projects. And we do that by thinking, first of all, is this the place that I would want to live? And then also thinking about how we can inject some of what we call PAC-ness into it. How can it be different from all of the other versions of multi-unit housing? And sometimes that comes with finding more places for specificity, more places for the clients to put their own stamp on the building, which is the biggest challenge for us in designing things like this, because we otherwise have such a close collaboration with our clients on single housing. It sometimes comes from moments like this, where we're trying to find an opportunity for how you could use a side yard, how you could generate an experience in a very simple move that isn't expensive and has a kind of big impact on the wider project. I think these sorts of projects are so important to me also because it's kind of the opposite flex that residential architects usually do, of going, this is the sweetest house I can design you. But it's actually very, very difficult to design a very affordable, good house that feels fun and feels interesting. And I think the challenge of that is such an important thing. Okay, how are we doing for time? We're good. Okay, we'll roll on. We'll go to performativity and our relationships with builders. So this is, oh, yes, good. Gotcha. All right, excellent. You're all waiting. Yeah, okay, my man here in the front row. Okay, good. So now that's out of our system, so you can all relax. Okay. So, this is Crinkle Cut. This is a project that is all about performativity. It's about how the building can perform as part of the culture of the place. It is in Point Wells on the main thoroughfare heading into, heading to the beach. Everyone comes past. It is a subtle pink, and it has these louvers all around the outside of it. And these louvers are important because they allow the building to change how it addresses the street. And it creates a space between the interior and the exterior that the occupants can occupy, but also to commune with the street and the community. So we get this kind of this variable privacy. And anyone who's ever had a conversation with their neighbours will know that being able to control that is important. So we want to be able to open right up on the days we're feeling expansive, on the days we want the breeze, on the days that we want to talk to Jeff, who's going to the beach. On the other days, we might want a little bit of screening. We might want a little bit of a breeze. We might want to be able to hear people come past, but we might not want them to see in. And then other days, again, we might want it to be completely closed. It is a house that is constantly moving as a result. So this project is not only a kind of performing object on the street, but it's also kind of testament to the relationship we have with our builders. It is a house for one of our builders. I would say that they have become incredible collaborators. All of the guys that we work with have this commitment to architecture and to the ideas of the project beyond the singular kind of aim of building a house. This particular client was so interesting also because they work for so many other architects, and they have this huge knowledge of what works and what doesn't, and they have a kind of really easy shorthand for talking about those things with us. So I think it kind of comes back to that idea of being kind of open to other perspectives and thinking about how our practice can be different but also be us. So I think I might end there.